Hello everyone and welcome to today's video and welcome back to my kitchen. I keep recording in here because it's the best place in my house to get natural light. Everywhere else is just a bit too dark. But today's video is going to be a bit of a mix match of footage. So the footage you've just watched is from our trip to Geneva. That was the drive back up the mountain and through the French border. And that stretch of road was incredible. I wish I had vlogged more of the journey, but it was snowing and raining, and if I'm being honest, I was focusing more on the B-roll because I was the passenger in that journey and it was my prime time to get my B-roll. And you know, I'm a photographer by passion, so each time that we stopped, all I could think of was, oh man, this is going to be so great for photos. But you know, nonetheless, it was a great journey, such a fantastic road. I'll put something up around here of the actual road that we drove down and where that footage is from. It's definitely worth checking out if you ever find yourself doing a road trip from either Switzerland to France or the UK to Switzerland or France to Switzerland. But anywho, the purpose of today's video is to really just catch up with everyone, let everyone know where I'm at, and talk about two things: the new R8 and a potential second car that I'm looking to buy. So let's start with the new R8 and some of my thoughts about what it's like. So as I mentioned in the previous video, we were lucky to be invited into the Audi lounge. And one of the perks was that you could jump the queue to go and check out the new R8, but you were given almost a guided tour of the car. So you had a representative from Audi essentially taking you around the car and talking through some of the key points, the design decisions, some of the new features, etc. And there were a few things that stood out to me from that tour. Okay, so the first is the looks of the car. Now, there is no denying that the R8 is a beautiful car. They have been pretty much since the R8 was introduced. Granted, the original R8 does look a little dated now, but it's always been a good looking car. And with that said, there was one thing that to me I was a little unsure about, and that was the rear of the car, okay? Because the new R8 has oval exhausts, and in pictures, they didn't look great. So I was very keen to check out the car in person just to see what they look like, and although they look better, to me, they still don't look as good as the current R8. So the 2017 car that you can buy right now is better looking overall. It's more of a complete package in terms of the design of the car. Everything looks as though it was designed intentionally for that car, whereas the new R8, I'm not saying they haven't made those decisions, but those ovals are pretty much the same ovals you get on my car but on an R8, and it just, I don't know, it just looks a bit odd in my opinion. So that was one thing that stood out to me. The other was the sound as a helicopter flies above my house. Now, the sound of the new R8 is very different. I've watched a few YouTube videos and you can notice the difference. It's a bit quieter, and someone from Audi confirmed to us that the car is in fact 4 decibels quieter than the previous R8, which doesn't sound like much, but in that weird magic they do with decibel and calculations, it's actually quite a bit. and it doesn't have that same kind of V10 roar as, again, the 2017 R8 has, that generation of R8. So those were the two things that stood out to me, and they just reinforced my decision to want to go down the used car route instead of buying a new R8. Because I was open to both. The depreciation isn't really an issue for me because I plan on keeping the car. So any money that I would potentially lose through trading in or reselling doesn't worry me. I want to keep the car long term. So my plan is to keep my car, my RS3, for a bit longer, probably until the end of the year, and then just do a review of where I'm at. I plan to put a much bigger deposit in this time around, so I will need to save for that because I do have a few life priorities before I can think about buying a second car or a new car. And yeah, I'm just really excited. It's center stage on my vision board, and it's a long-term goal of mine, and I just can't wait to pick it up. I can't wait to go to a dealer and just pay for the car and it be mine, and I can just live with it. Very excited. But let's talk about something that's going to happen much sooner than that. So I've alluded to this a few times in previous videos, but I want to buy a second car. Originally, I was thinking of buying either a Fiesta ST or maybe another Abarth, because I've owned a 595 competition and I loved it. In hindsight, I shouldn't have sold it, but you know, I wanted an RS3 and yeah, I sold it. Bad move. But I think I might have changed my mind again. So now I'm thinking, wouldn't it be cool if I bought a car for around the £1,000, £2,000 mark and essentially built my dream car from my teenage years? So if you're wondering at this point in the video, is Daniel having a midlife crisis? Probably. But when I was 17 years old, I was obsessed with Japanese cars because Max Power Fast Car, the Fast and the Furious movie, all of these things were at their peak. And, you know, every teenager wanted to go out and buy that RX-7 and buy a Veilside body kit. And I never got round to it. Despite my first 3 cars being Japanese, I just did not have the money at that time to go out and spend money on my car. To be frank, I could barely afford the fuel at that point in time, so spending any extras was just not going to happen, especially on the wage I was on back then. So, and then, you know, I grew up a bit and bought more sensible cars, and here I am again as a 32-year-old man. So I think it's about time that I went back and revisited that, and I'm thinking Japanese, but I'm a car guy. As cliche as that sounds, especially nowadays, I've been interested in cars for my whole life. Ever since I was a kid, I've been obsessed. My dad used to work for a company that transported Formula One cars all over the world, and I was very fortunate to sit in some very cool Formula One cars. I'm not going to do any name dropping, but some of them are very, you know, well-known drivers, and I have photos. They're Polaroids, obviously, at my mum's house. Maybe I'll dig them out actually and see if I can show you some of the people that I met and some of the people's cars I sat in as a 3-4-year-old kid. So I've been around cars my whole life, and I'm interested in classic Fords. You know, there was a guy who lived behind a friend of mine, and he owned a Mark 1 Escort. It was orange with yellow stripes. His name was Wayne, and he'd put a Cosworth engine in it. And at 15 years old, that was the dream, to just buy a Ford, put a Cosworth engine in. And there was a video on YouTube a few years later, so I must have been probably 17, 18 years old at this time, but I just remember watching that video over and over and over again. And it was, I think it was a Max Power photo shoot where the guy just did a kind of launch down a runway in a Fiesta that had a Cosworth engine in it, but the Fiesta on the outside looked like a standard LX. It was kind of the ultimate sleeper before sleepers were a big thing. And the sound of that car was just intense. And then also, I'm really into German cars. Obviously, I own an RS3. I'm a big fan of Audis, obviously. Despite my experience with Audi, I still think that they have such a rich history in motorsport and have made some iconic cars. But I also really like VWs, and although I'm not a big fan of the Golf R, I do like Golfs in general. And I remember another video I used to watch on YouTube a lot, which I'll actually link below because I really did used to watch this a lot. And it was the Dubsport Golf doing a quarter mile. And the Dubsport Golf was a twin engine. It was twin VR6 engines with twin turbos. And the sound, there was two things about that video, the sound, but also the sequential gearbox, and how cool I thought it was to have a sequential gearbox. It just blew my mind in a Golf. I think it was a Mark IV Golf, and yeah, man, that was the dream. But Japanese cars have always had a bit of a special place in my heart, mainly because when I was probably 13 years old, 14 years old maybe, I think, Gran Turismo came out, and that was very Japanese car biased. It introduced teenage boys such as myself to cars like the Skyline, like the RX-7, the Supra, etc. And I just remember playing that game so much and wanting a Skyline. That was the dream. And even though I eventually grew out of that phase and kind of lost a bit of the love for Skylines, I still appreciate a nice Jap car. And, you know, to me, the Supra is iconic. It's a shame that the new Supra is basically a BMW, but there you go. But the NSX, just all of those cars from that era will always be, you know, will always have a special place in my heart. But there's one particular Japanese car that isn't necessarily held in the same regard as those well-known cars. It's a car everyone knows, but it's not necessarily got the same revere about it as, say, a Supra does or a Skyline does. But I have always loved them. I've owned two. The very first one that I bought was £350, and the owner had cut the springs, so when you drove down the road it effectively just bounced like a lowrider. And I sold that car before I even passed my driving test, because I bought it. It was a bit of an impulse, but I bought it because I knew I wanted the car. So it came up on, I think it was Auto Trader. Me and my friend drove down there, bought it, and I had to get my girlfriend at the time to drive the car back because she had passed her driving test. But I loved that car. In hindsight, I wish I never sold it, because you can't find them now for less than £5,000, it would seem. And but the reason I sold it was because someone offered me £600, so I was making a clear profit. I was like, this is a no-brainer. So the car went. And then the second one that I bought was £300, and I loved it. I absolutely loved it. I did so many miles in it. It was my pride and joy. But I sold it because I got bored. And that was mainly due to the fact that I was limited with what I could do to the car. I remember removing the back seats from that car and feeling like I had done something really, you know, substantial to it. I felt like a tuner because I'd taken the back seats out. And I had to take the back seats out because there was mold growing on them because the sunroof kept leaking. But all of that aside, I just want to buy a cheap car and learn and do. So I want to try and do as much of it as I can myself. I already know how to paint cars. That was my previous life. So I think if I did a few practice runs, I'd get back into it easy enough. So I want to strip the paint back. I want to repaint the car an original colour. And then I want to learn and do as much as I can in regards to the engine, the brakes, the suspension, etc. I don't want to buy the car and just send it off to loads of different companies, because that kind of takes away the fun. If you're not bruising your hands or scratching your hands, you know, if you're not doing it in the cold, you know, getting wet, then it's like it's taken away the fun of it all. So I say all of this to say I'm mostly decided on what car I'd like to buy next, but and to make it clear, I'm keeping this car for the rest of my life. This isn't a car to do up and sell. I am keeping it for the rest of my life. So with that said, what car do you think would be a good addition to not only the channel but my life? And is there anything in particular that you think would be cool to see? Of course I'm going to make a series out of it. Of course, every other YouTuber is, and why not? Because I think these videos are really cool. You know, obviously some people do it better than others, but when they're good, they're good. And I think if the car's interesting enough, then, you know, why not? I should also make it clear though, that I have no intention of just restoring a car back to its standard, you know, spec. I am going to repaint the car a factory colour, but I don't intend on keeping it standard. You know, I want to go all in. And, you know, it'd be really cool to have just a reasonably quick old car. I remember my third Japanese car, the whole thing used to rattle when you put your foot down. I want that experience again. So with that said, before I ramble anymore, let me know in the comments below what second car you think would be cool to see on the channel. I'm on the hunt. I haven't yet found the right car, but I am definitely on the hunt for it. So before I make my mind up and go out and buy something, let me know what you think would be cool to see. And let's get started. Let's make some cool content out of this, because I want to get back to making content about my car, and I want to start making content about the second car, and I just want to be, you know, I just want to make videos that I'm going to be happy watching years from now. And I think my Geneva video is a prime example of that, because it's not going to be one of my most viewed videos. That's fairly obvious at this point, but it doesn't matter, because I thought it was a great video and it was a great trip, and years from now I'll be able to go back and watch that and remind myself of certain things, like, oh man, that was great, or oh, I remember doing that, especially with my memory. So that's what I want to do. Second car incoming, more videos about my car incoming, along with some new cool content and a new video that is going to be coming later this week. But until that does, I'm going to wrap this up because I'm rambling. So I hope you all have a great week, and until my next video, peace.